For early access to new episodes and other exclusive content, go to patreon.com/MiharuTheFox. Hey guys, it's Miharu and welcome back to SpyroCast. This is episode 45, and today I have a new guest. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I am Sparks, and I do IT sort of thing, senior technician. I do a little bit of YouTube here and there, VTubing here and there, but I don't really post as much as Miharu here does.
All right, very, very nice. We'll get right into the Spyro questions. What is your history with Spyro?
I grew up on Spyro with the original PlayStation 1 when I was a kid. I remember playing the first Spyro the Dragon and Gateway to Glimmer, which is Ripto's Rage for the North American people. I used to play the first one a lot more than I remember anyways, but I have played the second and third one respectively, completed them all as a kid, and I do remember many of the secrets, even for the Reignited trilogy. When that came out, I bought it the second it was available. But I do remember playing all the knockoffs, like Skylanders, for example, and all the other sort of games for the PlayStation 2. I remember playing A Hero's Tale quite a lot. Never really completed it as far as I remember, but I have done a playthrough recently with friends, and everyone's hated one, Enter the Dragonfly. We recently figured the glitches do work on the PlayStation 2 quite well, and spedrun that game in about 5 minutes. So I have played many of the Spyro titles, but not on any of the handhelds. So except the DS, as we had, what was the one with the Shadow Realm sort of area?
Shadow Legacy?
Shadow Legacy, that was it. But I never played the second one for the DS. We only had that one. But definitely the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 I played a lot of. But I've only played on the Skylanders series, the first Skylanders, Spyro's Adventure, Giants, and Swap Force. Past that, I haven't really played much of the other Skylander games. But that's my kind of quick history on Spyro there.
Okay. When you said second one for the DS, which one did you mean?
I swear there was a second one for the DS.
Because the only ones I know after Shadow Legacy were like maybe the DS version of A New Beginning and the
Eternal Night. There was a one for the Eternal Night.
And wasn't there a DS version of Dawn of the Dragon too?
A New Beginning, the Eternal Night, as far as I remember. Dawn of the Dragon was that co-op one, wasn't it? I didn't play that actually. I didn't get a chance for that one. That's it really on that front, as far as I remember.
Okay, very interesting. You've been on some of my community videos. You've
yes, I have
said your piece for Enter the Dragonfly, which I still think that some of the things that you've said about that game are very funny. I still think about that. The Bugs Paradise comment was hilarious.
I thought on that one quite hard actually. I used to do a bit of writing on the side, and I've seen a lot of reviews on video games, so I kind of have that weird collection of words that kind of work out well. Yeah.
And you've also given your thoughts on The Legend of Spyro and Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant.
Yeah, I have played Crash as well as Spyro, but I played more Spyro than Crash. So yes. I have a lot more knowledge on that one than Crash, sadly. But if you ever want to know about the first two games, I've played a lot of that one. And Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutants quite a lot as well. Finished both of those. But Spyro is my primary game of choice if I was sat between the two.
Yeah. So what would you say your favorite and least favorite games are?
Ooh, good question. So in my least favorite is definitely Enter the Dragonfly, simply because of how much of a bad game it was, where we used to find glitches in the game just as when we were kids. The funniest one my sister and me found was the infinite water glitch, where in the cloud area, I've got the name of the zone now, we broke it somehow. Don't know how, still can't remember how, but we would indefinitely swim in that area, and we could swim across the whole map as if we were stuck in an indefinite cycle. And it was just a bad game in general. Hated it. Definitely disliked it. Favorite game? It's quite an interesting one because I have high regards for A New Beginning, the third Spyro, Year of the Dragon, and just the Reignited trilogy when they restored that one was just everything in one go. But can't really count that one. But definitely A New Beginning and Year of the Dragon are my top two.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. What do you like about those two games in particular?
For Year of the Dragon, a lot of it was having the massive amount of content in such a small package. Bearing in mind there was CD quality about 700 megabytes, so you've got a lot going on with the side stuff, the skateboarding. My sister loved playing that. The endless amounts of characters, all the extra stuff that definitely brought the game in its highest regards for me. Regarding A New Beginning was the story in the main thing of having a rags to riches sort of style of, he's just been thrown into the bottomless of this one and make his way up with the 4 elemental dragons, rescuing them and then defeating Cinder at the end, and then rescuing her ultimately from the corruption. Just like a really big story to me. So definitely the large cast of characters for Year of the Dragon and the large amount of content for such a small game and the story of A New Beginning. So there's my two big parts.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. I think when it came to Spyro 3, of the trilogy, that was the one that had the most story. So
Definitely.
That's why it personally stood out to me when I was younger. And despite my feelings toward Legend as a whole, I'm not really into the gameplay, but I do appreciate the story and what they tried to do. Because I do like high fantasy stuff. I think it can be really cool. It's not always for me because sometimes it gets just a little bit too deep into lore stuff and it's not something that I can comprehend all the time, as I'm sure a ton of people who loved Legend when they were kids it seemed like they were all like dragon people. Like they loved dragon stories in general. And as much as I like Spyro, I wasn't actually a dragon person. I was more of a dinosaur person. So
Been there.
Yeah. So you notice that a lot of the people who have this affinity for the Legend series are also big fans of like Wings of Fire and stuff like that, like high fantasy book series involving dragons or other things.
What is it? We had Fire and Ice books that my family did have, but I wasn't really much of a reader on those books. I think since I grew up with a lot of different things, I didn't really attach myself to one. So in terms of dragons and stuff, they're just one of those parts of mythology. Because I was a massive PC player as well. So I'm not just a PlayStation, but PC. So for me, I had all kinds of different types of games. Big mechs from Total Annihilation, for example, or Age of Mythology was another big one I loved playing, which is all about mythology. The Greeks, the Norse, and the Egyptians didn't have dragons, except the Nidhogg.
See, and I've always loved mythology too, like mythological creatures, Greek mythology, Norse mythology. Always thought that stuff was fascinating as a kid, and I still do now. So I really appreciate when they try to bring stuff like that into games, and I really hope that Spyro in the future can sort of bring more mythological creatures and maybe architecture and things in its levels and things like that. I don't know if you were around the Spyro 4 rumor mill back then, but did you hear of the Realm of the Gods? That was one of them.
I hadn't really looked too much in the Spyro 4 leaks and stuff like that, but I do remember in the past where there was a lot more of these, see what they're going to be doing with the next Spyro games, especially when The New Beginning and Eternal Night came out. There was what are they going to do with the third one? And then we had Dawn of the Dragon. I think definitely of the whole universe that they have, the dragon magic is where I think is the pinnacle point. So you've got this fantasy dragon magic that allows you to have different worlds, different realms through portals. Now, we obviously know that they use those portals quite a lot. So you could have an interdimensional based one, let's say, that you can bring into a completely different realm simply by interlinking two dragon types together. So instead of, like a traditional dragon with 4 legs and 2 wings, there could be the wyverns, Spyro Wyvern or something like that, the ones with 2 legs. So there is a possibility where you could drag different versions of dragons. Was it in I forgot the name of it already. Hero's Tale, that was it. You had the teleporters, for example, that the professor would make. He could easily have done that again, like in Year of the Dragon, where the orbs could have led to something else. Was it Gateway to Glimmer as well? He definitely was much of the science type. So you could easily have one of the side characters break into something and then bring in a whole another universe together. You remember Ice Age, the dinosaur one?
Dawn of the Dinosaurs?
Dawn of the Dinosaurs, that was it. With it's something like that. You could have it where easily Hunter falls into an area while him and Spyro are messing around, let's say, and then you've got this whole underground thing of dinosaurs or equivalent. You could easily pull something like that. There is a lot of possibilities, but they need to keep it small, because the only trouble I see with a lot of games these days is them going big. Keep Spyro's formula as Spyro's formula. Don't branch out as much, because you may end up with another version of A New Beginning or Dawn of the Dragon, because I remember that one not being as good, but I never played it, so.
But that actually goes into my next question is, what are your general thoughts on the idea of Spyro 4, and do you think we could be getting it soon?
Good question. The only trouble with game development is you could spend about a year or two developing an idea, then it to be scrapped halfway through. So
yeah,
it's a possibility in the next 6 years, I estimate, you might end up with a Spyro 4, but they need to think about how they're going to do it, because like Crash 4, for example, I actually played Crash, the other one with the warping, I've already forgotten the name of it. Got to look it up 1 second. Crash, never
Which
remember the
number
name
was
of
it?
Number 4, Wrath of Cortex.
Wrath of Cortex, yeah.
So I played that one actually quite a lot as well as a kid, ironically. And with that one, they kind of retconned the whole thing in Crash 4, didn't they? With the masks and all that. There isn't very much they could retcon with Spyro. Definitely Enter the Dragonfly could be destroyed, but apart from that, the Legend series kind of is its own spin-off, so they don't need to touch that. But they could probably do it after episode 3, Year of the Dragon, where you could have, now that everything's happened, they go on to sort of do something else, but they'll still keep the characters. You know, they'll go somewhere, they'll go to Dragon Beach or whatever, and just
Dragon
enjoy
Shores.
something. Dragon Shores, that was it. And then you could have Big Baddie comes out of the water. Something simple as that.
Like a Kraken.
Like you could say Kraken, or you remember the Metal Sharks? Could have the leader of the Metal Sharks or something. Comes out one of them and goes, destroy you, Spyro, or something like that, and off you go on another adventure.
All right, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I do like that idea. So you're saying that you would rather have it be a sort of sequel to Spyro 3?
Yeah, just carry it on, really. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't retcon the other 3 games. And keep the story as it is, carry it on, and you shouldn't have any problems. It's only when you start going in and saying, Spyro 1 didn't happen. Well, Spyro 1 did happen. You know, it doesn't make sense. That's where A New Beginning kind of did its faults, in the sense of, is Spyro being born? Okay. What about all the other 3 games before that? It doesn't make sense in the sense of what it was.
Yeah, because that was kind of a rebooted thing. So people were wondering if this new game would it be a soft reboot? Would it be a direct sequel to Spyro 3? Or will it be like a distant sequel where like the other games did happen and maybe we referenced them, but like it's not necessarily right after Year of the Dragon?
Yeah. There's another possibility as well, where technically it's a very, very rare case of happening, but there's actually 2 games being made at the same time. And you could have it where a story for the 3rd game comes out, so the 4th one, and then a Legends version where they add story to the Legends or retcon some of the Legends. So then you could end up with both of the sides of people being happy, because you could easily improve the story of Legend and the original at the same time. Just don't merge them. You should be good.
Right. So what are some of the most important things that you think a new game should have?
It all comes down to what type of game we've got going here. Obviously, with a Spyro 1, 2, and 3, there's the basic formula of jumping between platforms. You've got the grabbing of eggs, grabbing the treasure. Keep it simple, keep it safe, as they would say. But then they could probably improve upon the mini games. Because I remember the skateboarding everyone loved, or could say loved, but some of the other ones, for example, the flights were always a bit of a pain. So maybe not keep the flights as much, but I did enjoy the flight missions in A New Beginning. Those were fun.
Yes.
So they could probably incorporate both sides of it. Let's say, you probably remember this as well with the balloonists in the first game. So instead of the balloonists, you could fly your way to the next island, as an example.
Right. That, or Mark has been saying this, and some other people have actually expressed their interest in this too, like a boss fight that's also like a flying level, much like Cinder in A New Beginning.
Yeah, you could probably do that. Actually thinking on that, as you were saying, you could have the next set of enemies or the big boss being some form of steampunk boss. So you could say he is very much of the heavy machines in the sky. So you could easily base a boss off a flying ship that fires upon you and stuff like that. And you've got to try and destroy the sails or attack the people on board, let's say. And then you end up with this form of boss battle against a large vessel. You on your own could probably take it down. You are Spyro after all. And that could be a possibility between the different missions. However, I would say keep it to a minimal, because you don't want every between areas or these individual bosses per flight. Otherwise, it can become very tedious. In a lot of games, you want to try and limit how much you push the same idea over and over and over again. It can get boring very quickly. Again, going back to the first games, every world you went to was a different world, but in the same sort of theme. You didn't have the same end goals each time over and over again. Like in Gateway to Glimmer, you've got the 3 different bosses before you hit Ripto. So you've got individual types of battles that can do different things. So let's say you did do the individual flights. The first flight could be a warship, airship, whatever you want to say. The second one, you could be swimming, so you defeat, let's say, sea monsters. But then the battle needs to be completely different. So it doesn't need to be the same style, rail shooter. It needs to be something else. And so on and so forth. So you bring in fresh ideas each boss, just so it doesn't repeat itself. What was a good one? Would be A New Beginning, where you fight the Ice King. There, you got the big arena, you got to run between them. He does his ice abilities. Then skipping forward, then you got the train for the last few missions before Cinder, where you've got that one going around, let's say, and that's running towards you, and you've got to hit it at certain points while it is down and stuff. So you've got completely different bosses per instance, level, zone, whatever you want to say. That could be definitely something to help. Repetition kills a lot of players' interest.
Right. So would you say that you'd prefer a return to the first game's style of platforming and exploration over 2 and 3's more mission and minigame focused gameplay?
I would. Just as you're going through the world, you learn it, you can play with it. But you don't want to completely lose the other games. Again, like with the cast of characters is quite large, so you could easily slap in Hunter here, Professor there, but then lose a couple of the extra characters. For example, I wasn't a massive fan of Sergeant's levels and Agent 6. They weren't my favourites, but
Agent
I did
9?
really... Agent 9, Agent 6. Agent 9, the monkey.
You flipped the number.
Flip the number. I definitely liked forget its name. The kangaroo.
Sheila,
the Aussie. Sheila. I really liked Sheila's levels in the sense of you had that you were still on the ground and you had the really high jump, and you could use her abilities quite well for getting to high places and low places. Because with sergeants, for example, I always found the camera controls very hard and annoying. So when you're trying to do like the bomb drops and then the enemies just go across the room and you're like, oh, for Pete's sake. And Agent Nines was a bit like shooty, gallery shooty. So I always like a bit of the enemies can get you closer rather than trying to not get shot. That was the only downside to his ones. The Yeti was kind of like Sheila's, but slow. If it was a little bit faster, maybe. But I've never really enjoyed his as much, but a lot more than the other two. I don't know what your thoughts on those characters' levels are like, though.
As for the critters, let's see. I really like Sheila. She's a good one to play as in both the original and Reignited. I've personally always been a big fan of Sergeant Bird, especially his mission in Enchanted Towers. That's my favorite challenge in that game. It's just so freeing to be able to fly around, not just, condensed minigame level, but the actual level that Spyro gets to run around in. Like, you get to do that with one of the other playable characters. It's such a different sort of concept, and the others didn't really have that. But the freedom of being able to fly all around, I just love that so much. And I get that the controls can feel a little bit stiff, especially in the original. Reignited made it feel a lot better. But yeah, I've personally always loved that. Never been a fan of Agent 9 stuff at all, especially in the original. Again, Reignited is slightly better, made it a little bit more like Ratchet and Clank, but still not quite there. But I love him as a character, though. Of the four, he is my favorite as a character.
I like Sheila. Not for other reasons. Totally.
Yeah. And I think Bentley is just kind of... His gameplay is meh, and except for the whack-a-mole, I really hate that. And the Yeti boxing thing, I always hated that too. God. So
yeah, ice physics is my most hated thing in those games as well. You always got to hate ice physics. So
Bentley was always kind of meh, and as a character is probably my least favorite. So
makes sense.
But what is your stance on returning characters and which ones should be playable?
Ooh, okay. Still, I would say kind of grabbing a couple of extras here. I don't know if you've played A Hero's Tale, but you can play as Hunter in that game.
Yes.
The mole character, I completely forgot his name.
Blink.
This proves that I have not not really kept up my thoughts on here. But I know the games in gist. I just can't remember half the names. And for example, I didn't really like his levels either. So I definitely would say Hunter would be kind of a nice reintroduction. Sheila, definitely. Sergeant, following what you were saying, actually, you could technically return him, but in a different way. So, you know how you can repeat levels in Crash for time trials? Instead of that, what if you had levels where they were split into individual zones that allowed you to also expand upon? So, for example, when you go to enter a portal after completing as Spyro, you can then do that level, complete the level, and then when you finish that level, like in Lego games, you could return in that game as a different character, let's say. So as that character, you've now unlocked different areas in a way. So you still go through the same port, you still arrive on the other side, but let's say you went as Sergeant. So you went up the Sergeant Bird, up the sky. Oh, look, there's a platform up there you couldn't see as Spyro. So you could easily expand the worlds purely based on the characters you play. So you could use Sheila's kicks to get into areas with large rocks. Again, I would love to bring back the hub worlds, Autumn Springs and stuff like that with the third game. Definitely worked out quite well. But you could also have it where you can change characters. So instead of just trying to think the best way to incorporate it, because if they were in their respective houses, like in the third one, you could easily switch between them and run around the home hub world as that character. So you could really use Sheila, Sergeant Bird, Agent 9, no. Professor can be still an NPC. Hunter. Moneybags. What if he was an unlockable character just for the fun? At the end of it, just because it would be funny. He's completely useless. He's just the VIP from TF2, for example. Just a useless character.
Okay.
And Bentley, probably not, because he has technically the same abilities as Sheila. If you think about it, kick, hit things with hammer, or in this case, stick. So I'd probably scrap Agent 9 and Bentley. They can probably go. But the rest of it, I would just add Hunter to the list of characters to play. That's pretty much it on that front.
Okay. That's interesting. I personally think that the critters should not be playable this time around, especially if it's going to be any sort of sequel to Spyro 3, because I feel like they already got their time in the spotlight. Hunter would be completely fine. And if it were up to me, either Bianca or Elora would be playable.
I still consider them as NPCs, but I can see your point. Bianca would be quite an interesting one with her magic abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But then trying to incorporate magic into the world the same way, maybe a bit different. If you're trying to base that on an idea from another game, let's say, kind of a hard one. You could probably stick it like the dark side abilities in Star Wars, where you could have, you can only do this if you have this character here later on in the game. So you can only unlock the dark side when you've done a certain amount of episodes, and you can unlock that character.
Right.
So you could probably hide it behind a special wall, and then when Bianca learns that ability, let's say she doesn't have all her abilities, she has to relearn them or something like that. You could easily pick up the spellbook pages later on in the games, slap them on the book. There you go. She can now use the ability to levitate or open this door, for example. So that could be a possibility. You're not wrong.
Yeah, and since Crash Team Rumble kind of, I feel like they were testing the waters for what they could do with Elora, so we've seen what she can do, so I believe that the next Spyro game would be a perfect opportunity to make her fully playable in one of these games.
Maybe. I don't know what she would do, though. That's the only other question.
Well, I really liked her healing abilities.
Support character, but the only trouble is, how do you incorporate a support character into a game that's not inherently got that ability?
Well, if they make, like, maybe a multiplayer mode, but she could also do, like, her kicks and flips and stuff, so she could basically do sort of the same thing as Sheila, maybe, just a little bit different. And I always thought she could have like a yo-yo attack, which would reference the Fonz and Fracture Hills.
That is true. They love their chewing gum too, so you could easily do that. Yeah, she probably could replace Sheila in theory, but it all depends how and what he's done.
Yeah, but I do think there is potential there. What are your thoughts on the possibility of Cinder returning?
100%. No questions asked. However, I'd be very mindful on what she would be. Typically, I would just throw her in as a skin rather than a complete playable character. The only reason behind it is because Cinder and Spyro are technically the same in the sense of everything. The only difference is she's got a completely different set of abilities. I was trying to remember her. Isn't she got lightning instead of flame?
She does have lightning in Skylanders.
That's what I'm thinking of. Got the model behind me, actually. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Instead of flame, she's got lightning. She can still headbutt. She can still fly. She can probably do the exact same thing as a Spyro, but just a different ability. So I think skin, easily, for that unlockable character at the end of the game or midway through. It depends on how they perceive and do what they do with the game.
Okay. But regardless of her being playable or not, what about just her in the game, like in the story?
Completely depends on the story. Let's say if we were doing a new beginning, you could easily have her in again following at the end of Dawn of Dragon or something. They can return together back to the temple. And then you could have it so that she'll be as part of the story, but may not be available till later on or something like that. Because they easily did that with Eternal Night, where at the beginning, she and Spyro goes, he follows her out, she leaves, does her thing because of the darkness. Easily, you could have her incorporated the same or similar way of she's there at the beginning, and then she does her own thing, let's say, comes back, and then is now playable or something equivalent of that. But you've got a large amount of characters already, so you've got to be careful not trying to shove everyone into it. You could probably do 2 more games, so you wean them in slowly and then get rid of some for the second one, but still keep the whole idea going. But you don't want to put too many characters into a game. Otherwise, it just becomes a bloated mess of customizable characters like Sonic.
Exactly. And not to mention, it would become even more bloated if they're going to add any new characters in it, too.
I wouldn't add any more. I think we've got enough.
Well, what do you mean? Like, that you don't think they're going to add any new characters?
Not as required. Maybe you could have a cameo as Crash, but that's probably as far as it goes. A good example of that is Skylanders itself. How many characters are in Skylanders? And they tried making a TV show about it, and there was just so many different characters, so many different things. They didn't flesh it out as much for most of the characters. They just used the in-game models and said, hey, this character here, you remember him, right? Rather than actually adding backstories. Because that's another thing of, do most of the characters in the game have backstories? They could probably flesh out a couple of those as well. The only one that technically has a full backstory is Spyro and Cinder through the whole Legends trilogy.
Right, but what about like a new villain?
Ooh, okay, now you're going on this one. You could, but it's also a question of what type of villain. So if you were to do, let's say, Spyro 4 was a return to formula, but you could have the next villain, someone who has watched Spyro for a period of time and it was seen what he's done in the first 3 games. So what you could do is you could have this villain who makes robotic versions of the bosses. So you could be fighting the sort of same ones again in a way, but then you're trying to get to him or her or whatever of this like robotics thing. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
It can be all kinds of different things. It really comes down to how and what the game developers would think would be an interesting villain, because you've seen how many Crash villains there are, but they keep reusing them over and over and over again. They haven't really changed from their formula. You'll always be fighting Cortex. You'll always be fighting Engine. So you kind of, it really depends. Really does depend. I'm not able to say too much on that.
Okay. I was just curious because you said if we don't need any new characters, I'm thinking, well, then what are we going to do about, a new villain? Or like, you don't think that they'll be traveling to a different world that has any different characters? I'm just very curious, like, as to why you thought there wasn't going to be anything new.
I wouldn't say per se on villains. I was referring to more of a cast of colourful characters. Because you could put anyone as a villain. Quite literally, anything could be a villain. So it really comes down to how and what they do. You could create a new realm. You can put a whole new set of enemies in there. Go back to Skylanders, with Chaos. It was a completely random character that they had of super evil bad guy that had a funny voice. I absolutely love the voice actor.
Yeah.
Tim. And you could easily pull something like that, but I can't really say too much on it without being in that development team and then seeing what people have idea-wise, because it could be for anything. What sort of villain would you go for?
Well, actually, I asked that recently, not only on the last SpyroCast, but I put a community post out about if you were to create a brand new Spyro villain, what would they be like? And a lot of people had various answers that were quite interesting. Like many people want to see another type of mythological creature like a griffin. I personally said a phoenix. I think that would be cool. Or some kind of supernatural being or magic user like an evil wizard, or even a fairy or a vampire. That was one of them too. And most people said an evil knight. And I thought that would be pretty cool. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It'd be interesting because you could pull the classic Spyro look of the castles and you could probably slap in a knight easily. But it all comes down to, again, what you do with it. Because you could do a King Arthur scenario. You've got your main villain be King Arthur, let's say. Then you've got your Black Knight, who is the guardian of the bridge. You've got Merlin, who would be your wizard. And you could probably go defeat the 2 others, and then you can get to King Arthur, let's say. Just a good example. then you could probably do that with the style you're thinking of. But the only reason why I'm very blank on it is just purely because you need to base the villain around what you're doing. I could easily pull any type of villain, be it what you say, a phoenix, let's say. So you pull a phoenix out. So what type of environment would a phoenix be in? Would you be in a nice desert zone, or would you be in a castle of some sort? It all comes down to how you incorporate this sort of stuff into the game itself. Because you can slap in as many enemies and many characters as you want, but if you can't incorporate them into the levels, then you end up with a room full of enemies you can't deal with, or do whatever you can with them.
Right. Well, with the Phoenix, I would think it might be... A castle would be cool, but more like a fire kind of thing. Like a volcano.
Or you could do the underworld, Erebus, easily.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to, you could have Spyro go into the underworld, meet Hades or something.
Right, and that goes back to the whole mythology thing that we were talking about earlier and on the last podcast. So, yeah, okay, well, that's all very interesting. On the last SpyroCast, I mentioned the idea of bringing in more female dragons. What are your general thoughts on seeing female dragons?
You could bring back more female dragons. Ember would be an interesting... Ember versus Cinder for Spyro. Have them fight over him. That's definitely someone's fanfic somewhere. Definitely, there are a lot of females in The Hero's Tale, such as the Granny and stuff like that, where they have Keeping of the Eggs. There wasn't really any females in the first game. In the second one, we had Alora, of course, but that was pretty much the only other female that we had, and then we had Cinder. But the only other thing is, what would you do with those female characters? Because again, it all comes down to characters. You could easily slap one in, but what do they do? What's the sort of thing? Could they give Spyro upgrades or something? Or you could have a dragon that's interested in technology, works with the professor, and then she can just be an NPC, let's say. But it all comes down to how you want to incorporate in the levels that you have, what type of style of game you've got. Because what would you really do with upgrades with Spyro? What do you get out of it, let's say, or anything? I'm kind of working with the flow, but I definitely would say both Ember and Cinder easily could be in, but I wouldn't know of any more that could be added, except maybe a baby dragon girl or something that wants to become Spyro, let's say.
Okay.
And have her follow him around in the overworld or something, and kind of want to learn from him. Or you could also drag in the whole Spyro is now an adult. He's had this baby with possibly Cinder or Ember. Again, fight over that, your fanfics. And go from there. You could easily have he's teaching his young as an example. There's a lot of possibilities, a lot of possibilities, but I can't really say for Spyro's story. I like just the way he is.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for being on this episode of SpyroCast.
You're welcome.
And thank you, all of you out there, for listening. As always, if you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more casual gaming content. And I'll see y'all in the next SpyroCast. Until then, this is Miharu, signing off.
Ta-ta.